The mining station orbited a dead world, its metal corridors echoing with the steady hum of life support systems. Captain Sarah walked through the cramped passages, checking on her small crew of 12 humans who had been extracting rare minerals from the planet's surface for the past 8 months. The work was dangerous, the pay was decent, and the isolation was complete. They hadn't seen another soul since the supply ship left 3 months ago. That changed when the proximity alarms screamed through the station. "Captain, we've got incoming ships," called out Martinez from the sensor station. "3 vessels, unknown configuration. They're big, Captain, really big." Sarah rushed to the bridge, her boots clanging on the metal deck plates. Through the viewport, she could see sleek, predatory shapes emerging from hyperspace. The ships were massive, easily 10 times the size of their mining station, with hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapon ports bristled along their surfaces like the spines of some deep space creature. "Are they responding to our hails?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer from Martinez's grim expression. "Nothing, Captain, but they're launching smaller craft, looks like boarding pods." The crew gathered on the bridge, their faces pale under the harsh fluorescent lighting. They all knew what this meant. Pirates didn't usually travel in fleets of warships, and legitimate traders didn't ignore communication attempts. These had to be raiders from one of the predator species that haunted the Outer Rim territories. The first impact shook the station violently. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as the artificial gravity fluctuated. Through the hull came the unmistakable sound of cutting tools. "They're coming through the cargo bay," reported Jackson, the station's engineer. "Hull breach in 30 seconds. Sarah grabbed the emergency beacon transmitter. Even if they managed to send a distress signal, help wouldn't arrive for weeks. But she had to try. Her finger hovered over the activation switch when the cutting stopped. The silence was somehow more terrifying than the noise had been. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors, accompanied by clicking sounds that definitely weren't made by human vocal cords. The crew huddled together on the bridge, clutching whatever makeshift weapons they could find. Sarah kept her hand on her sidearm, knowing it would be useless against whatever was coming, but taking comfort in its familiar weight. The bridge doors exploded inward. The creatures that poured through easy description. They stood nearly 8 feet tall on powerful digitigrade legs, their bodies covered in chitinous plates that gleamed dully in the emergency lighting. 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws extended from their torsos, while their elongated heads held rows of teeth that could tear through steel. Their eyes were multifaceted like an insect's, but they moved with the fluid grace of born predators. The humans pressed back against the far wall of the bridge as more of the creatures filled the room. Their leader, distinguished by intricate scarring across his chest plates, stepped forward and spoke in accented but clear English. "I am Hunt Leader Al of the Dominion. This station and all within it are now property of the Hunt Pack." Sarah forced herself to step forward, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I'm Captain Sarah. This is a civilian mining operation. We're not armed, and we have nothing of military value." Al's head tilted to one side, a gesture that might have been curiosity or amusement. "You misunderstand, human. We do not seek your machines or minerals. We seek prey for the young ones to practice upon. Your species has proven adequate for training purposes." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd heard rumors about the hunting traditions, but she'd hoped they were exaggerated. The reality was apparently much worse. "However," Al continued, his mandibles clicking together, "there has been a complication. One of my offspring has gone missing from our ship. A youngling barely past the molting stage. Until it is found, you will remain alive to assist in the search." One of the others stepped forward, smaller than the rest but still towering over the humans. The scarring on its plates was minimal, marking it as young by their standards. It spoke rapidly in their clicking language, its voice high and agitated. Al listened, then turned back to Sarah. "My second offspring reports that the missing youngling was last seen near the docking bay before your station was breached. It may have somehow made its way aboard during the assault." Sarah's mind raced. If one of these creatures was loose on her station, it could be anywhere. The ventilation shafts, the cargo holds, the maintenance tunnels, there were 1,000 places something that size could hide. "We'll help you search," she said quickly. "My crew knows every inch of this station. We can cover more ground working together." Al's eyes fixed on her with predatory intensity. "You seek to bargain for your lives? Admirable if futile. Very well, you will assist. But know this, human, if my youngling is harmed in any way, your deaths will be neither quick nor merciful. The search began immediately. The split into hunting pairs, their advanced sensors scanning for any trace of their missing pack member. Sarah and her crew were assigned to check the areas too small for the adult aliens to navigate easily. They crawled through maintenance shafts and storage compartments, always under the watchful eye of their captors. Hours passed with no sign of the missing youngling. The grew increasingly agitated, their clicking conversations becoming sharper and more urgent. Sarah noticed that Al kept checking a device on his wrist that she assumed was some kind of bioscanner. Captain, whispered one of her miners as they searched through the hydroponics bay. I heard something in the ventilation shaft about an hour ago. Sounded like crying. Sarah frowned. Crying? Are you sure it wasn't just air circulation? I've been listening to those fans for 8 months. This was different, softer, almost like... He paused, looking embarrassed. Like a scared kid. The idea seemed impossible, but Sarah filed it away. They continued searching, growing more desperate as the patience wore thin. She could see it in their body language, the way their claws extended and retracted, the constant scanning of their surroundings, the low growls that rumbled from their throats. Finally, as the station's artificial day cycle began to dim the lighting, Sarah heard it too. A soft, whimpering sound coming from somewhere in the walls. It was barely audible over the hum of the life support systems, but it was definitely there. She was in the crew quarters section when she heard it, searching through personal belongings while 2 guards watched from the doorway. The sound seemed to be coming from the wall between her quarters and the common area. Moving carefully, Sarah pressed her ear to different sections of the wall until she located the source. Behind the wall panel, in the narrow space where the power conduits ran, something was making small, distressed noises. I think I've found something, she called to the guards. They moved closer, their sensors sweeping the area she indicated. One of them, the younger she'd seen earlier, made an excited clicking sound. It pressed its own head to the wall, listening intently, then called out in its own language. Within minutes, Al and several other adults had arrived. My offspring is there, Al confirmed, studying his bioscanner. But the passage is too narrow for us to extract it safely. The youngling appears to be wedged in place. Sarah studied the wall panel. I can get to it. The conduit space connects to a maintenance hatch in my quarters, but I'll need some time to remove the panel safely. Do it, Al commanded. But remember, any harm that comes to my youngling will be repaid tenfold upon you. Sarah nodded and set to work with her tools. The panel came away slowly, revealing a narrow lined with power cables and environmental controls. And there, huddled in the furthest corner, was something that made her stop in complete surprise. The youngling was indeed barely past molting, its chitinous plates still soft and pale. But it wasn't the terrifying predator she had expected. It was small, perhaps the size of a human child, and it was clearly terrified. Its large eyes, not yet developed into the multifaceted orbs of the adults, were wide with fear, and its tiny claws were curled protectively around itself. When it saw Sarah, it pressed itself even further back into the corner, making soft, chittering sounds that sounded remarkably like whimpering. Hey there, Sarah said softly, her voice gentle despite everything that had happened. It's okay, I'm not going to hurt you. The youngling stared at her with those huge, frightened eyes. Sarah could see that it was trembling, its soft plates vibrating with each rapid breath. This wasn't a monster or a weapon in training. This was just a scared child, lost and alone in a strange place. Your family is looking for you, she continued, keeping her voice low and soothing. They're very worried. Would you like to go back to them? The youngling made a questioning chirp, its head tilting in the same gesture she'd seen from Al. Slowly, carefully, Sarah extended her hand toward it. Come on, I'll help you get out of there. You must be hungry and thirsty. To her amazement, the youngling didn't recoil from her touch. Instead, it reached out with one tiny claw and gently touched her fingers. Its plates were indeed soft, feeling more like flexible plastic than the armor she'd seen on the adults. That's it, Sarah murmured. Come on out, there's nothing to be afraid of. With infinite care, she worked the youngling free from the narrow space where it had become wedged. It was lighter than she'd expected, and she found herself cradling it like she would a human child. The youngling curled against her, its fear gradually subsiding as it realized she meant no harm. Behind her, she could hear agitated clicking as the adult detected what was happening. But Al's voice cut through the noise, sharp and commanding. When Sarah emerged from with his offspring in her arms, the hunt leader's expression was unreadable. "My youngling," he said simply. Sarah looked down at the small creature in her arms. It had fallen asleep against her shoulder, exhausted from its ordeal. She could feel its tiny heartbeat against her chest, rapid but steadying. "It's just scared and hungry," she said quietly. "It probably got lost during the boarding action and panicked when it couldn't find its way back." Al approached slowly, his movements careful and controlled. The other watched tensely as their leader reached out to reclaim his offspring. But when he tried to take the youngling, it made a distressed sound and clung to Sarah. "It doesn't want to let go," Sarah observed, surprised by her own reluctance to hand over the small creature. The hunt leader's mandibles clicked together in what might have been frustration. "N was always the most sensitive of my offspring. It forms attachments quickly." Sarah looked down at the youngling, N, and felt something shift inside her chest. This tiny being had sought comfort from her, a member of the species its kind hunted for sport. There was something profoundly wrong with the situation, but also something deeply moving about the trust the young creature had shown. "Maybe," she said carefully, "we could figure out a different arrangement." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Sarah could feel the tension radiating from the other as they processed what she had said. Several of them had extended their claws slightly, their posture shifting to something more aggressive. But Al remained motionless, his multifaceted eyes fixed on the human female who held his youngling. "Explain," he said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to speak calmly. "Your youngling is frightened and confused. Forcing it back to your ship right now will only traumatize it further. Let me care for it until it feels safe enough to return to you willingly." The suggestion sent ripples of agitation through the assembled. Their clicking language filled the air, sharp and rapid. Sarah caught fragments of what seemed like outrage and disbelief. The idea of leaving one of their young in the care of prey animals was apparently inconceivable. Raised one clawed hand, and the chatter stopped immediately. "You ask me to trust my offspring to creatures we hunt for sport. Your proposal is either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." "Maybe both," Sarah admitted. "But look at it this way, your youngling chose to come to me for comfort. There must be a reason for that, and if you take it back now, while it's still afraid, you might damage whatever bond it's trying to form." She could see the conflict playing out across the hunt leader's features. N stirred in her arms, making a soft, chirping sound before settling back to sleep. The other watched their leader intently, waiting for his decision. "You have one rotation," Al said finally. "One of your day cycles. If N has not willingly returned to us by then, we will take it by force and proceed with our original plans for this station." Sarah nodded, relief flooding through her. "Thank you, but I'll need some basic supplies, food, water, maybe some toys or comfort items that smell familiar." The hunt leader's mandibles clicked in what she was beginning to recognize as amusement. "You treat my offspring as if it were a pet." "I treat it like what it is," Sarah replied. "A scared child who needs care and comfort." This seemed to surprise Al. He studied her for a long moment, then gestured to one of his subordinates. They had a brief exchange in their clicking language before the subordinate departed, presumably to gather the requested supplies. "You will be watched," Al informed her. "My hunters will remain on your station to ensure the youngling's safety. And human," his voice dropped to a threatening growl, "if this is some elaborate deception, if you harm my offspring in any way, your death will be legendary in its creativity." Sarah understood the threat, but she was more concerned with the practical aspects of her situation. Caring for an alien child was challenging enough without having armed guards watching her every move. But as they dispersed throughout the station, she realized she had bought not just time, but opportunity. She carried N to her quarters, the only private space available. The youngling had awakened during the transition and was now looking around with curious eyes. Unlike the predatory intensity she'd seen in the adults, N's gaze held innocence and wonder. "You're a curious little thing, aren't you?" Sarah murmured, settling into her desk chair with the youngling in her lap. "I bet you've never seen a human habitat before." N chirped softly and reached out to touch Sarah's hair with tiny claws. The gesture was surprisingly gentle, and Sarah found herself smiling despite their circumstances. The youngling's plates were already beginning to darken slightly, a sign that it was growing more comfortable. A knock at her door interrupted the moment. Sarah called for entry, and Martinez stepped inside, his eyes widening when he saw the alien child in her arms. "Captain, are you insane? That thing could." "Could what?" Sarah interrupted. "It's barely bigger than a human 5-year-old, and it's clearly just as helpless. Look at it, Martinez. Really look." Her engineer studied in, taking in the soft plates, the large eyes, the way it clung to Sarah like a frightened child. His expression gradually shifted from fear to something approaching sympathy. "It's so small," he said quietly. "Hard to believe it'll grow up to be like those monsters in the corridors." "Maybe it doesn't have to," Sarah said, the words surprising her as she spoke them. "Maybe there's another way." Before Martinez could respond, another knock interrupted them. This time it was one of the guards, carrying what appeared to be supplies. The alien warrior's presence filled the doorway, its battle-scarred plates telling stories of countless hunts. But its movements were careful and controlled as it set down a container of items. "Nourishment for the youngling," it said in heavily accented English, "and familiar scents from the nest chip." Sarah thanked the guard and examined the supplies after it left. There were several containers of what looked like protein paste, designed specifically for young. A collection of soft objects that might have been toys or comfort items, each one carrying the complex scents that marked them as coming from N's family unit. And most interesting of all, a small translation device. "Let's see if we can understand each other better," Sarah said to N, activating the device. The youngling's next chirp came through the translator as a simple word: hungry. Sarah smiled and offered one of the protein containers. N accepted it eagerly, its tiny claws working to open the sealed package. As it ate, Sarah used the translator to introduce herself properly. "I'm Sarah," she said, the device converting her words to clicks and chirps. "What's your name?" "N," the youngling replied through the translator. "Are you my new nest mother?" The question caught Sarah off guard. She looked down at the small creature, realizing that in its simple understanding, she had taken on a caretaking role that it interpreted in familial terms. The responsibility felt heavier than she had anticipated. "I'm your friend," she said carefully. "I'm taking care of you until you feel ready to go home." "Home is with Nest Father Al," N said, but there was uncertainty in its voice. But home felt angry, loud noises, sharp scents, not safe. Sarah began to understand. The hunting ship environment, while normal for adult, was probably overwhelming for a sensitive youngling. The sounds of weapons charging, the sense of aggression and violence, the constant preparation for battle, all of it would be terrifying for a child, even one born to a predator species. "You're safe here," she assured it. "No loud noises, no angry scents, just quiet and calm." Over the next several hours, Sarah learned more about N and its species than any human had ever recorded. The youngling was naturally curious and surprisingly communicative once it felt secure. It asked endless questions about human customs, technology, and behavior, displaying an intelligence that was both alien and remarkably childlike. "Why do humans not hunt?" N asked at one point, curled up on Sarah's bed with several of its comfort objects. "We do hunt in a way," Sarah explained. "But we hunt knowledge, resources, solutions to problems. We've learned that cooperation often works better than predation." "Cooperation," N repeated, the concept clearly new to it. "Working together instead of fighting." "Exactly, like how we're working together now. You're helping me understand your people, and I'm helping you feel safe and comfortable." The youngling considered this for a long moment. Nest Father says cooperation is weakness. Strong hunters need no help. Sarah chose her words carefully. Maybe there are different kinds of strength. Physical strength, yes, but also the strength that comes from friendship, from caring for others, from building instead of destroying. As the hours passed, more of Sarah's crew began to visit. Initially, they came out of curiosity or concern for their captain's safety. But gradually, they found themselves drawn to N's innocent charm and eager questions. The youngling was particularly fascinated by their various skills and specialties. Jackson, the engineer, showed N how the life support systems worked. The youngling listened intently, asking technical questions that surprised everyone with their sophistication. Shared stories of the mining operations, describing the careful process of extracting valuable materials without damaging the delicate crystal formations. You make things instead of breaking them, N observed with wonder. That is strange but beautiful. Doctor, the station's medic and botanist, was especially patient with the youngling's questions about the hydroponics bay. She showed N how plants grew from seeds, how nutrients were delivered through carefully controlled systems, how each plant had its own needs and requirements. Life is fragile, Doctor explained, letting N touch the soft leaves of a tomato plant. It needs careful attention and protection to flourish. Like younglings, N said thoughtfully, but Nest Father says fragile things deserve to be broken. Maybe, Doctor replied gently. Your Nest Father hasn't learned yet that protecting fragile things can make you stronger, not weaker. The youngling absorbed these ideas like a sponge, constantly comparing them to what it had been taught. Sarah could see the internal struggle playing out in its expressions, the conflict between inherited instincts and newly discovered possibilities. Meanwhile, the adult maintained their watchful presence throughout the station. They observed everything but interfered with nothing, their predatory instincts held in check by their leader's orders. Sarah noticed that several of them seemed puzzled by what they were witnessing. The younger she had seen earlier, the one who had found N's hiding place, approached her directly. Unlike the others, it showed no signs of aggression or impatience. I am, it said through its own translator, second offspring of Hunt Leader Al, N's nest sibling. Sarah nodded respectfully. Your sibling is remarkable, very intelligent and curious. N was always different, admitted. Never showed proper hunting instincts, always asked too many questions. Nest Father hoped training voyage would correct these flaws. What if they're not flaws? Sarah asked carefully. What if they're just different strengths? Mandibles clicked in confusion. Explain. Sarah gestured toward where N was enthusiastically helping sort mineral samples, its tiny claws surprisingly adept at handling the delicate specimens. Look at how quickly it learns, how well it cooperates, how it finds peaceful solutions to problems. Those are valuable skills. But they are not hunter skills. No, Sarah agreed. They're builder skills, creator skills. Maybe your species needs both kinds. This conversation was interrupted by an alarm from the bridge. Sarah left N in Doctor's care and hurried to investigate, followed by and several other. The sensor display showed a new contact approaching the system. As the signature became clearer, Sarah's blood ran cold. It was a human patrol ship, heavily armed and heading directly for their position. They're responding to an automated distress beacon, Martinez reported. Must have been triggered during the initial hull breach. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. A human patrol ship encountering a fleet would mean certain violence. The aliens would view any approach as an attack, while the humans would see the alien ships as an obvious threat. The situation would escalate rapidly to a shooting war. How long until they arrive? She asked. 18 hours at current speed. Sarah looked around the bridge at the assembled aliens and humans. 18 hours to prevent a massacre that would destroy any chance of peace between their species. 18 hours to prove that cooperation was stronger than conflict. We need to talk to Al, she said, all of us together. As they gathered in the station's main conference room, Sarah realized that everything they had learned, everything N had taught them about the possibility of understanding between their species, was about to be put to the ultimate test. The conference room had never been designed to hold beings as large as but they squeezed inside anyway, their armored forms filling the space with an aura of barely contained violence. Hunt Leader Al dominated the head of the table, his plates telling stories of countless battles. Around him sat his senior hunters, their weapons never far from reach. On the other side, Sarah and her crew looked pitifully small in comparison. But they weren't alone. N sat between Sarah and Doctor, its presence serving as an unlikely bridge between two species that had never imagined peaceful coexistence. Speak, Al commanded, his multifaceted eyes fixed on Sarah. What crisis demands this gathering? Sarah activated the main display, showing the approaching human patrol ship. A rescue vessel is en route. They detected our distress beacon and think we're under attack. When they arrive and see your ships, they'll assume the worst and open fire immediately. The room erupted in clicking conversations as they processed this information. Several of the hunters seemed pleased by the prospect of battle, their claws extending slightly in anticipation. But Al raised a hand for silence. Let them come, he said with cold confidence. 3 human vessels pose no threat to a hunt pack. You're missing the point, Sarah said urgently. This isn't about who wins the fight, it's about what happens after. That patrol ship is part of a larger fleet. When it doesn't report back, they'll send more ships, then entire battle groups. This will start a war between our species that could last for generations. Leaned forward, speaking through its translator. Perhaps that is inevitable. Our peoples are natural enemies. Predator and prey cannot coexist. But we have coexisted, Doctor interjected gently, gesturing toward N. For the past 18 hours, we've worked together, learned from each other, cared for each other. Your sibling has shown us that there's another way. All eyes turned to the youngling, who seemed to shrink under the attention. N looked up at Sarah with its large, innocent eyes, then spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. I don't want anyone to fight. Fighting makes the loud noises that hurt my ears. Fighting makes the angry scents that burn my nose. Fighting makes people go away forever. The simple honesty of the statement hit the room like a physical force. Sarah saw several of the adult exchange glances, uncertainty flickering across their features for the first time since this ordeal began. The youngling speaks of weakness, growled one of the senior hunters. It has been corrupted by exposure to prey thoughts. Has it? Sarah challenged. Or has it discovered something we adults have forgotten? N has learned more about both our species in one day than we've managed in decades of conflict. It's found solutions where we only saw problems. Tell me, how is that weakness? Al studied his youngest offspring with an unreadable expression. You claim the youngling has found solutions. What solutions? Sarah looked at Doctor, who nodded encouragingly. Show them, N. Show them what you created. The youngling brightened and scrambled down from its chair, rushing to a corner of the room where it had been playing earlier. It returned with a small device cobbled together from human components and technology that its siblings had shared. I made a translator that works better, N explained proudly, setting the device on the table. The old ones only translate words, this one translates feelings too. Watch. The youngling activated the device and spoke into it in its native language. The translation came through not just as words, but with emotional undertones that conveyed the depth of feeling behind them. I love my nest father, but I also love my new friend mother Sarah. Love is not weakness. Love makes me want to protect both of them, even from each other. The room fell silent. The device had captured not just N's words, but the genuine affection and concern in its voice. For the first time, the humans could truly understand the emotional complexity of communication, while the aliens heard their youngling's feelings expressed in human terms. Remarkable, breathed Martinez. The kid figured out how to bridge not just language barriers, but emotional ones. Because it didn't see barriers, Sarah added. It saw possibilities. It saw 2 families it wanted to bring together instead of keep apart. Hunt leader Al reached out with one massive claw and gently touched his offspring's head. N, you have done something unprecedented. But do you understand the implications? If our species truly attempted cooperation, everything would change. The hunt packs, the traditional ways, the very foundation of our society. Would evolve, N said simply. Like the plants in Doctor's garden, they change to fit new environments. If they don't change, they die. The wisdom of the statement, coming from someone so young, seemed to resonate even with the hardened hunters. Sarah could see the internal struggle playing out across their faces as they grappled with concepts that challenged everything they had been taught. The human ship approaches, reported one of the communications officers. They are hailing both the station and our vessels. Sarah looked at the chronometer. 17 hours had somehow compressed to less than 1. Time had run out for philosophical discussions. Now they needed concrete action. Let me talk to them, she said. As the human in charge, I can explain the situation, but I need your word, Hunt Leader, that your ships won't fire first. And if they attack us, Al demanded. Then you defend yourselves, but give peace a chance before we choose war. The Hunt Leader considered this for a long moment, his gaze shifting between his youngest offspring and the tactical display showing the approaching human vessel. Finally, he nodded. Very well, but if this is deception, if your people use this opportunity to strike at us. They won't, Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. Not if we do this right. The next few minutes passed in tense preparation. Sarah composed herself and opened a channel to the approaching patrol ship, while the fleet held position but powered down their most obvious weapon systems. It was a delicate balance of trust and caution. Human patrol vessel Intrepid, this is Captain Sarah of Mining Station Omega-7. Please acknowledge. The response came immediately, crisp and professional. Captain, this is Commander of the UES Intrepid. We're responding to your distress beacon. What's your status? Our sensors show multiple alien vessels in your vicinity. Sarah took a deep breath. Commander, I need you to listen carefully. The alien ships belong to a species called the... They're not currently hostile, and we're in the middle of delicate negotiations. I need you to maintain a safe distance and avoid any aggressive actions. Negative, Captain. My orders are clear. Any alien vessels in human space are to be treated as hostile. We're moving to intercept. Sarah's heart sank. She had hoped for more flexibility, but military protocols were designed for worst-case scenarios. Commander, please, lives are at stake here, both human and alien. Give me a chance to explain. You have 2 minutes to evacuate your station, Captain. Then we engage the alien fleet. Sarah looked around the room at the faces watching her, human and alike, all hoping she could find words that would prevent catastrophe. But it was N who stepped forward, its small form somehow commanding attention despite its size. May I talk to the ship humans? The youngling asked. Sarah hesitated. The idea of putting an alien child on an official military channel was unprecedented. But conventional approaches weren't working, and sometimes it took innocence to cut through the complexity of adult conflicts. Commander, Sarah said, I have someone here who wants to speak with you. I think you should hear what they have to say. Before the commander could object, Sarah handed the communication device to N. The youngling spoke clearly, its words translated by its improved device with full emotional context. Hello, ship humans, my name is N. I am a youngling of the Hunt Pack. I know you are afraid because my family's ships are very big and look scary. But they are not here to hurt anyone anymore. They are here because I got lost, and the station humans helped me feel safe. There was a long pause before Commander responded. This is irregular. Who am I speaking with? I told you, I am N. I am 7 molting cycles old, which doctor says is like being 6 human years. I want to tell you something important. Your people and my people don't have to be enemies. We can be friends instead. Friends who learn from each other and help each other and make beautiful things together. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds before responded, his voice noticeably softer. Young one, N, I'm not sure you understand the situation here. Your people and mine have been in conflict for a long time. I know, N replied sadly. But that doesn't mean we have to keep fighting forever. Captain Sarah taught me that cooperation is stronger than hunting. Doctor showed me how to grow plants instead of destroying them. Engineer Jackson explained how to build machines that help people instead of hurt them. Martinez taught me that even hard rocks can become beautiful if you're patient and careful. Sarah watched in amazement as the youngling continued, its innocent wisdom cutting through decades of mistrust and fear. I made something for you, N continued. A translator that helps people understand each other's feelings, not just words. Would you like me to send you the technical data? Maybe your ship builders could make one too, and we could talk better. Commander's response came after another long pause. Yes, I would like to see that technical data. As N worked with Martinez to transmit the translation device specifications, Sarah found herself holding her breath. This was the moment when everything could still go wrong, when fear and protocol could override curiosity and hope. Captain's voice came through the comm again, but now it carried a note of wonder. Our science officer is looking at these designs. She says the theoretical framework is unlike anything we've ever seen. The integration of emotional context algorithms with linguistic translation matrices. It's revolutionary. N figured it out in less than a day, Sarah said. By playing with spare parts and asking questions. Imagine what our species could accomplish working together deliberately. On the display, she could see the human patrol ship had stopped its aggressive approach and was now holding position at a safe distance. The fleet remained motionless as well, their weapons powered down but ready. I need to speak with my superiors, said finally. This situation is far beyond my operational parameters. Can you maintain the current status for another few hours? Yes, Sarah replied immediately. We can maintain it as long as necessary. As the comm channel closed, the conference room erupted in a mixture of relief and continued tension. The immediate crisis was averted, but the larger challenges remained. Hunt leader Al looked at his youngest offspring with an expression that might have been pride. "N, you have done something that seasoned diplomats and war leaders could not. You have created a moment of possibility." "I just told the truth," N said simply. "That we can choose to be friends instead of enemies, that building together is better than fighting apart." Over the next several hours, as military commanders and government officials on both sides grappled with the unprecedented situation, life on the mining station took on an almost surreal quality. Humans worked side by side, sharing knowledge and perspectives that had never been exchanged before. Doctor found herself in deep discussions with biotechnicians about advanced life support systems. Their species had developed incredibly efficient methods for sustaining life in hostile environments, while humans had innovations in biological diversity and agricultural techniques. Martinez and Jackson collaborated with engineers to examine the aliens' remarkably sophisticated propulsion systems. In return, they shared human expertise in industrial automation and precision manufacturing. Even the warriors found common ground. Sarah watched in fascination as her security chief, a former military officer named Williams, engaged in tactical discussions with hunters. Despite their vastly different approaches to conflict, both groups shared a respect for strategic thinking and operational efficiency. But it was N who remained the heart of these exchanges. The youngling moved easily between groups, asking questions, making connections, and serving as a living example of the possibilities that cooperation could create. "Look at them," said to Sarah as they watched N help Doctor plant seeds in the hydroponics bay. "The youngling has found something none of us understood we were searching for." "What's that?" Sarah asked. "Purpose beyond the hunt, meaning beyond conflict, a reason to grow instead of simply survive." Sarah nodded, understanding exactly what the young meant. "Your brother has shown us all that there's more than one way to be strong." The breakthrough came when word arrived from both human and command structures. The unprecedented nature of the situation, combined with the potential benefits of the technological exchanges already taking place, had convinced leaders on both sides to authorize formal diplomatic contact. "They're sending negotiators," Commander reported during a three-way conversation between his ship, the mining station, and the Hunt Pack flagship. "Ambassadors with the authority to explore the possibility of formal relations." Hunt leader Al's response carried both hope and wariness. "The Dominion Council has also agreed to send representatives, but they will expect proof that cooperation can coexist with strength." "Then we give them proof," Sarah said. "We show them what N showed us, that building together makes us stronger than we could ever be apart." The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. The mining station became an unlikely embassy, hosting the first formal diplomatic contact between humans and. Both sides brought their finest negotiators, their most brilliant scientists, their most experienced military advisors. But through it all, it was a 7-year-old alien child who continued to serve as the bridge between worlds. N moved easily between the formal sessions and informal gatherings, asking innocent questions that often cut straight to the heart of complex issues. "Why do the grown-ups make everything so complicated?" N asked Sarah during one of their quiet moments together. "If people want to be friends, why don't they just say so?" Sarah smiled and stroked the youngling's soft plaits. "Because grown-ups sometimes forget what you knew from the beginning. That friendship is a choice, and it's always the better choice." The formal agreements would take months to negotiate. Trade protocols, territorial boundaries, technological exchange guidelines, mutual defense provisions. The complexity of relations required careful attention to countless details. But the foundation had been laid. The fundamental question of whether humans could coexist peacefully had been answered not by diplomats or warriors, but by a lost child who had chosen trust over fear, curiosity over aggression, and love over hate. As the diplomatic teams prepared for the long process ahead, Sarah found herself thinking about the future. The mining station would likely become a permanent embassy, a symbol of the cooperation that N had made possible. Her crew would become the first humans to work regularly alongside, learning from each other and building something unprecedented. You realize you've changed everything," she said to En during their last quiet evening together before the youngling returned to its family's ship. "I just wanted everyone to stop being scared," En replied, curled up against her as it had that first night. "Scared people do mean things, happy people do nice things. I wanted everyone to be happy." Sarah looked out the viewport at the human and ships floating peacefully side by side, their crews preparing for a future none of them could have imagined just days before. In the distance, more ships were arriving, explorers, scientists, diplomats, all drawn by the promise of something new. "I think you succeeded," she whispered to the sleeping youngling in her arms. "I think you succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams." The predator's young had gone missing, only to be found sleeping peacefully in human arms. In seeking that lost child, two species had found something far more valuable, the possibility of a shared future built on understanding instead of fear. And it all began with a single choice, to comfort a frightened child rather than turn away from it. In that moment of simple human compassion, the seeds of peace between the stars had been planted. The universe was about to become a much more interesting place.